Hi everyone. It's Ali from Rent Replacement here. We're just going to introduce the last speaker. So we've got Christopher, who's joining us from across the pond, who's going to be talking about all things tech and innovation. So we're very excited to hear you for the headline session of the day. So Christopher, I will hand over to you, and I will minimise my screen.
Great. Well, thank you, Ali. So I'm going to go to my charts. Can you see my charts? That's the first question. Yes.
So, yeah, we can see the slides.
Great. So delighted to be here. My name is Christopher Bishop. I describe myself as a nonlinear multimodal careerist. So I've had 8 careers so far, ranging from touring rock musician to working at IBM corporate headquarters, driving the use of social media and virtual worlds. You can find more about me on my LinkedIn profile. I encourage all of you to reach for me on LinkedIn, please. That's the lingua franca for connecting these days, right? But I'm not here to talk about me. I'm here to talk about you and all the cool stuff you're going to do over the course of your working life. So let's jump in. I think when you're talking about the past and the future, it's always good to talk about the past. So it's good to have sort of socio-cultural perspective, history, what's been going on before we got to now. I want to talk about emerging careers, my take on where they are, how that's happening. I'm going to talk a little bit about new learning models because it's a key correlation between what you know and how you work. And it's an ongoing process, right? Then I'm going to share with you what I call my Future Career Toolkit. It's a 3-step process that I put together based on how I navigated these 8 different careers. And then just talk a little bit about what's next. So let's start with the background. Let's go back. So to keep it in perspective, right? The world of work has been constantly reinvented since we were like hunter-gatherers living in the plains, wherever. And it's part of a process, again, that's been going on for literally thousands of years. So take a moment to think about that. Keep that in perspective as we contemplate sort of Twitter and Facebook relative to telegraph, to transcontinental railroad. Anyway, so I usually do this as a quiz when I do these workshops live, but I'm just going to sort of lay this out for you to, again, give you some perspective. And fortunately, the character I'm going to talk about who made this quote is from where you people are, probably most of you listening from. So this is a quote, and what I usually do is ask people to tell me who they think said it and when and about what, right? So those 3 criteria. So I refuse to issue a patent for fear it will put my poor subjects out of work, right? So who might have said that and when and about what? So the person who said it was Queen Elizabeth I, right? And she said it about automated knitting machines, mechanized knitting machines, right? That were the cats that do this stuff aren't going to know how to do it, man. If we use like machinery that instead of letting people do it, in their living room in the cottages. And she said this in 1589. So just for perspective, right? Over 400 years ago. So all by way of saying these kinds of conversations about technology transforming work and how it gets done and skill needs and career opportunities has been going on for a long, long time and documented. So many of the top jobs today didn't exist 5 years ago, right? So, Google didn't need autonomous vehicle operators 5 years ago, 2015. Blockchain strategists, after Bitcoin appeared, it was kind of an esoteric thing. Now, JP Morgan Chase is hiring people to manage their JPM coin, trying to figure out ways to tie it to fiat currency so it can get more widely adopted. Sustainable energy, already, I think there was a day in England last year when energy delivered by sustainable sources bypassed traditional sources like coal and hydro. 3D printer operator, that's another burgeoning field. Again, that wasn't really a job. But GE is now making, jet engine parts, and researchers at Harvard are creating, vascular tissue and organs on 3D printers. And data scientists, I was at a meeting last year where a gentleman who runs a big hedge fund said he had fired 100 analysts and hired 10 data scientists because he needed people who could connect data in orthogonal ways, right? Capture lots of different information and put it together to make sense and help him make strategic business decisions. So that's perspective again. I do this as a quiz. This is a U.S. perspective. So the U.S. Department of Labor predicts that today's learners will have how many jobs by the time they're 38. So keep in mind, this is a public sector agency with, in theory, no agenda, no priorities. They're just capturing data and representing it to inform their readers, if you will, and certainly the marketplace and business owners and operators. So their guess is that you'll have 8 to 10 jobs by the time you're 38. So that's pretty astounding, right? The days of working at IBM for 30 years, and I worked there with people who were there 30 years, are gone. That model is over. That's not happening anymore. And the good news is you can have 8 to 10 jobs because there's lots of interesting stuff to do. It's not like you get fired or you get bored. It's like do something interesting and then do something else that's interesting, right? So estimates are that 85% of the jobs that today's learners are going to do, say over the next 20 years or so, haven't been invented yet. 85%. That's an amazing number, right? And you're going to use technology that doesn't exist, things like implantable medical devices, holographic learning tools. This is a vertical farm. And you're going to use it to solve problems we don't yet know are problems. So Tim O'Reilly, who's a famous sort of author, media guru, event planner, says that as long as there are problems to solve, there'll be jobs. So we don't know what those problems are, but you can be sure there'll be more and more of them and require smart, talented people like you, listeners and watchers, to solve them. So let's shift gears, talk a little bit about emerging careers. How does this work? My take is that emerging careers connect 3 sort of pieces, if you will. They connect unlikely disciplines. I'm going to share some examples with you. They're going to require old skills and the acquisition of new skills, and they're driven by tech for sure, right? So lots of examples, and that's kind of the new career nebula, if you will. That's where new careers are being created, driven by these 3 factors. So let me share some examples with you of unlikely disciplines that are connecting now to drive future careers, future jobs, right? So mechanical engineering and pharmacology. So there are now jobs in nanopharmacy. The 3 chemists who won the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago won it for creating nano machines. So there are now devices like neural dusk and implantable and ingestible devices that deliver pharmacology to the molecular or even atomic level. They go into your body and they take the medicine right to the wound or the tumor or whatever. And this is a burgeoning field. MIT has a brand new $400 million building on campus that's focused just on nanotech. How about if you're into architecture and maybe mobility? So new models are emerging for how you get people around urban centers. So these are some kind of phantasmagoric images around how we might, help people get around urban centers in the future as they get more congested and more populated. This is kind of an interesting approach. Again, it's a brand new idea using existing technology and then transforming it into a new model for travel and transportation. How about if you're into robotics and the law? So those areas kind of never connected because robotics was really nascent and maybe in research labs. So how do you connect those two? Well, here's an example. So if this robot drops a 10-pound box on your foot, who's responsible? Or this one breaks grandma's, ancient crystal when loading the dishwasher, who do you call? Or if this robot, steps on your cat going up the stairs delivering your package. So does the buck stop at the developer, at the coder, at the company that bought the robot, the company that leases the robot, the company that created the robot, which part of the robot? The people who wrote the AI, but not the physical device. So anyway, robotic ethicist is a new job that people are going to have to step up and figure out. This is my favorite. So if you're into, say, hospitality and astrophysics, there's an unlikely combo, but one that is an emerging job, emerging career. So this is Orion Span, which is a company that's going to put together and launch a orbiting hotel. There'll be 12 guests and 2 crew members, and you go up there and go around the Earth for like 6 days. So one of the challenges might be, how do you mix and serve a martini in microgravity? That's a new skill, right? So that just hopefully gives you some ideas about where technology is driving this connection of historically disconnected disciplines to create new opportunities. Those are just some kind of random examples, but there are many, many more. I want to talk about new learning models because I think that's key. One of the challenges about education is that it's often viewed as an event that happened in the past. This is not true, right? Learning is a lifelong activity that's going to go on your entire life. It never stops, right? Especially nowadays. The good news is that there are different ways to do it. So this is one of my favorite quotes. This is from a manifesto by David Blake, who's the CEO and founder of a company called Degreed. He says, the future doesn't care how you became an expert. Like, get to it, figure out what you need to know and learn it. The good news is there are lots of opportunities. The bad news is there are lots of opportunities. So you've got to do some rationalization and triage. So MOOCs, massive open online courses, Khan Academy, of course, Coursera, edX, Udacity. Much of this content is free. Actually, it cuts a broad swath, from business to data-specific kind of courseware. And then non-traditional sources of education, things like YouTube, right? A friend of mine rebuilt the engine in his SUV using YouTube videos. He bought a crank and took it out of the car and fixed it. Wikipedia for sure. LinkedIn Learning, a little side plug. I have a course on LinkedIn Learning called Future-Proofing Your Data Science Career. There's lots of really interesting courseware, again, across a range of topics. There are apps, TED Talks. So The Economist has an app called The Espresso that publishes every morning. They have sort of 7 categories, and it's really interesting information, summaries about what's going on in the world of business and culture. So lots of options. This is Laszlo Bock, who is a former, basically CHRO, right? Chief Human Resources Officer, although because he's on the West Coast and worked at Google, his title was SVP People Operations. But anyway, he says, the world only cares about and pays off on what you can do with what you know. And it doesn't care how you learned it. This is going to be true no matter where you go to work, and really regardless of vertical or discipline, more and more going forward. Keep that in mind. Let's talk about my Future Career Toolkit. So in the course of navigating these 8 different careers, again, from touring rock musician, I was in a band in the 70s that opened for the Eagles and ZZ Top. I played with Chuck Berry at the Meadowlands. I was a studio musician in New York. I played with Robert Palmer, did a live album at the Dominion Theatre in London with him in 1980, and then got into the jingle biz in New York, played bass and sang on the first Kit Kat jingle, give me a break, oh, give me a break, yeah, break me off a piece of that Kit Kat bar. And you get paid residuals, so checks appeared in my mailbox for many years as a result of that. But I've taken these different experiences, including the IBM decade and a half, and put it into what I call my Future Career Toolkit. So I want to share that with you, give you some tactical, practical advice around how you might explore your next career and the one after that. So I divided it into 3 tools. I call them Voice, Antenna, and Mesh. So Voice is basically kind of defining your own brand. What's your value proposition? Antenna is mapping what you do to what's happening in the world, where there are conversations going on. And then Mesh is finding and sharing your perspective with the actual people and companies and organizations that are doing the work you teased out based on your voice exercise. So let's talk about it. So I call this, defining your uniqueness. What's your voice? Again, related to music, right? What skills and experience make up your personal brand? And keep in mind, this is going to change and morph over the course of your multiple careers. I mean, again, I went from being a bass player to being a web-based strategy consultant, and now I'm a futurist. So it's morphed and changed over the many years I've been in the workplace. But here's how you do it. Pick a favorite movie, a book, a TV show, a game, can be current or from your childhood, and think about what do you like about it. Write down 2 or 3 aspects that you relate to from this trigger, if you will, right? So here's mine. I'm going to share mine so you can have a real world example. So my favorite movie recently was Blade Runner 2049, because it's a couple of years old now, because I'm interested in future culture and technology. The book I chose is called The Rise and Fall of Nations by Ruchir Sharma. It's about sort of the recent history of economics and global business and how it's morphed and changed, say, over the past like 50 years or so. Because again, at the end of the day, it's all about business and economics, right? Whether you're, for-profit or public sector or a startup or an NGO or a foundation, you've got to have more coming in than's going out, right? So these are my sort of triggers, if you will, to get to the voice exercise. The second piece is what I call antenna. Back to the idea that there's lots of conversations going on, everything from elite newspapers to social media. So the challenge is tracking where these conversations are going on around culture, business, society, politics, technology. And based on the topics in the voice exercise, finding out a range of sources in media, and then also assigning a frequency. Make this a regimen, right? Make it a protocol that you follow. So again, these are my sort of sources, if you will, my antenna sources. So for future culture, a couple of sources I use. One is Futurism, which is a website. They also have a newsletter. And I check this daily. I get their newsletter. They talk about, what's trending kind of in future business and cultural conversations. The Futures Agency runs webinars, and they do them monthly. I'm on their list. I sign up and attend to learn about, again, broad sort of future culture and business topics. The second attribute is around tech. So the MIT Technology Review is a wonderful magazine and website, and they also feature newsletters around a range of tech-related business topics. So I go to their website, actually get their print magazine. They publish it quarterly now. It used to be monthly, but again, the model has changed. And BBC Click, which is a great show. Bravo, kudos to BBC. It's a weekly show. It's on here in the U.S., like on Saturdays. And it's an hour-long show where they talk about business and technology and where innovation's going on. Again, these are things that are typically sort of at the edge, but that are being explored. And the implication is for you around skills and possible careers based on these new technologies that they describe and how they're going to impact business models. And then the third category is around global business. So Bloomberg runs a weekly show called Studio 1.0, and it's a TV show where they interview senior execs from companies like Pandora or even Facebook. They talk to leaders that are doing interesting stuff in Silicon Valley. So I try to watch that show to get a sense of conversations around leading edge business driven by technology. And then Marketplace is a daily podcast that public radio here in the US puts out. And again, they talk about leading edge kind of business models, who's doing what where. And again, the implication is always how technology is changing it or impacting it. And that's a daily podcast. So just some ideas. Now, this is just sort of a framework to give you a sense. Now, social media for sure. I mean, I follow MIT Tech Review on Twitter and BBC Click. I set alerts for topics that I'm interested in, so I get information in my inbox about newsletters or articles. I also read the New York Times on my phone. I mean, an elite newspaper that's now moved to the digital era, right, and makes it easier to search and doesn't fill up my house with newspaper, which is a good thing. So this is the antenna model, right? Where are these conversations going on around topics that you're interested in based on what you teased out, the triggers identified in the voice exercise? So the third tool is what I call mesh. This is something that's called an in-map. LinkedIn used to provide this to premium members, and it was a visual representation, right? Sort of 3D data representation of your network. So this is mine from a few years ago, but it represents, how dense your network is in certain areas, and how it's connected to other parts of your network. So the blue might be IBM, the green might be musicians, right? The red might be sort of futurists, the purple might be college friends, the same kind of gray random stuff in the upper part might be, say, academics that I'm connected to or have interacted with over the years. So the idea is to, using the voice exercise criteria, do a LinkedIn search. Again, I'm hyping LinkedIn. I'm a big fan of that as a tool. It's sort of the lingua franca, right? The coin of the realm. It's where people go to, look for people to hire, to look for people to interact with, to look for influencers to follow, thought leaders. It's the kind of tool of record. So what I would encourage you to do after you've done the voice and antenna exercise is to pick 3 people to connect with on LinkedIn based on a shared interest. And again, the criteria that you use to determine, what the antenna content is that you're following. And also find one group to join, right? And when I do this live, I ask people to turn one-on-one and describe, who you found and who you might connect with. So you might do that in the chat. You might do that, in person when we can get together in person, but certainly you could do it on Zoom. If you see somebody in the chat talking about something interesting, reach for them, connect with them, have a Zoom call with them to talk about the 3 people they connected with, what their antenna sources are, what their voice triggers might be. So again, this is me, just examples. For Future Culture, I tracked down this guy named Gerd Leonhardt. He lives in Zurich. He's actually a musician as well. But he has a wonderful company called the Futures Agency, and he runs webinars where he talks to futurists, and he has a great idea about how travel will be transformed. He says that the airlines are the ones that can afford to set up sort of holographic VR, AR-driven pods. You go to the airport and get in this pod and then have a VR experience with someone on the other side of the planet as opposed to getting on a plane as an option, again, a hybrid model. Right? For tech, I tracked down Krista Svor, who's the GM and runs quantum software at Microsoft. I've been very interested in quantum recently. In fact, I was the master of ceremonies a couple of weeks ago at Inside Quantum Technology Europe. And she's part of my network now. And they're doing really interesting work in quantum at Microsoft. So she's someone leading edge tech that I've connected with. In terms of global business, I've connected with Thomas Malone, who's quite a well-known author. He has a book called The Future of Work. I would encourage you to check it out. It's 10 years old, but it has some really prescient insight that I think you'd find interesting. One of the things he says is that corporations will devolve over the next decade into a core set of resources running the top functions, and everything else will be run across a network, the way movies are made. So he teaches at MIT Sloan. He has a recent book called Superminds, but Future of Work is a really great book. So I'm now on his proverbial radar. So again, that's how it works, right? Hope that makes sense. I want to talk just a moment about CRM tools, right? So customer relationship management. It's key that you figure out some way to keep track of this so you're not doing it on like Post-it notes or the back of a napkin or even an Excel spreadsheet, with all due respect. There are tools that are designed to do this. My favorite is called Less Annoying CRM. It was built by a couple of grad students at Washington University in St. Louis. Cloud-based. They have an app. It works on your mobile device. But a way to keep track of who you spoke to and what they said and who they're connected to and when to follow up. And you can attach files. And it's a way to keep your network, your mesh organized and keep track of it. Again, because it's, building a network is not a job that ends. It's not like you wake up on Tuesday and go, okay, I'm done. I got my network. I'm all set. It's like, this is going to go on right to the end, your whole entire life. And again, it's going to be a bunch of different people in your network as your career situation changes and morphs and evolves, right? So LinkedIn for sure. So what's next? Putting it all together. Again, I'm going to share this deck with the team. So you'll have a view of these tools. You can also find a workbook version of this on SlideShare of just a Future Career Toolkit with those grids for you to use to take advantage of this tool, right? I'd also encourage you to check out my course. You can go right to the Future Career Toolkit in the middle of the course. Even though it's data science focused, the toolkit, again, is sort of vertical and discipline agnostic. So I encourage you to check it out if you want to get more detail about how it works. But the idea is voice, continue to reflect on what makes you unique and know that it will evolve. Antenna, be diligent about monitoring information sources and finding new ones and setting up a schedule for how often you check where these conversations are going on and what's being said, right? And then finally, the mesh. My admonition is add 5 people a week to your LinkedIn profile. Make it a job. If you get to Friday, tomorrow at 5 o'clock, and you haven't added 5 new people, get on it. Use criteria, again, based on the voice exercise, and track down people that are doing interesting stuff so you get on their radar. So when an opportunity appears in their organization or a colleague in their network needs someone with the skills and experience that you have, they think of you, right? So ready to move to your next job. So that's my talk. Please be in touch. You can follow me on Twitter. Send me an email. Here's my email address, Chris@improvisingcareers. There's interesting stuff on my website. Definitely reach for me on LinkedIn. Again, I'm a huge fan. And I'll see you in the future. I hope this was valuable. Let's keep in touch. All right. Ali, I'm going to toggle back to you.
Hi there, Christopher. That was so interesting. Thank you so much. Yeah, some great insights and some really good food for thought. So hopefully all of the students watching have taken a lot out of that. So in the normal format that we've got 15 minutes or so for Q&A. So anybody who is watching the stage, I would very much like to see any questions that you've got coming through, and I can put them to Christopher. But in the meantime, I'll get started. So it sounds like you've had a very interesting career, and also love the fact that you're the first person that we've had sing on one of these events that we do. So that definitely deserves a bit of kudos. But do you want to talk us through some of the different aspects of your career? I think you mentioned in the backstage that you've had 8 different careers. Do you want to talk me through some of those and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so I have a degree in German literature from a small liberal arts college in Vermont, but I minored in music as well. I was playing, I was assistant principal contrabass in the Berkshire Symphony. I was studying with Jimmy Garrison, who was John Coltrane's bass player, a very famous jazz saxophone player. And I was playing in rock bands in like ski lodges on the weekends in Vermont. But after college, I got a chance to audition for a band called McHenry Spring. And again, it was, someone that I knew. So back to the importance of networking, to the mesh, right? Someone that I knew was a friend of the guitar player, and they needed a bass player. And I auditioned and got the gig, much to my surprise. I figured they'd hire like a session guy. And then 6 months later, I was in Germany jamming with Jeff Beck in Berlin, and did a tour of England, and then did a record at the Manor in Oxford, England, which was Richard Branson's studio, and then went to London to mix it and ran into Mick Jagger on the way to the men's room. He was doing Goat's Head Soup downstairs, and I was doing my record upstairs. So that was pretty interesting. And when the band broke up, it had a typical kind of bell curve, sold unknown, sold records unknown. I moved to New York and became a studio musician. And then quickly realized that to sleep in your own bed, you've got to be a session player. You've got to be doing jingles and record dates. So I broke into that business, again, through sheer dint of perseverance, calling 3 people and asking them for 3 names and just, taking my tape around, and finally, was hired as a studio musician. My first real job was at age 40, working at a jingle house, running a synclavier, which was the state-of-the-art digital musical instrument at the time. Sort of where I first got introduced to computers. I like to say that in 1985 in New York, music became data. So you had to learn how to run a computer, sample and sequence. So that's sort of what led me to IBM. I was hired into corporate internet programs. I taught myself to be a web producer after the jingle biz. Went to classes and read books and took lessons and stayed up late surfing the web looking at code, source code. And then worked at IBM for 15 years in a lot of different roles. And then left about 7 years ago, e-tired, as they say in big blue parlance. And I've been working as a freelance kind of writer and speaker and presenter for 7 years or so.
Amazing.
And your students are going to hopefully have similar careers. I'm somewhat, with all like modesty, the poster child for the way these students, your listeners, are going to work. So. Yeah,
sure. And it was so interesting, the stat about how many different careers or career changes someone might have before they're getting towards their 40s. And I'd imagine a lot of the people watching are feeling like their career will be set from straight out of university, whereas in reality, obviously there is a lot of things you can do to change your career course and your career direction. So we might have talked about a few of them, but are there still any top tips for people about what they can do to keep themselves current and to keep themselves knowing what may be just around the corner?
Yeah, so a couple of things. There's a very interesting interview with Laszlo Bock, the gentleman that I cited here, by Thomas Friedman, who's an author and op-ed writer for the New York Times. It's a two-part interview where he asked Laszlo Bock, what does it take to be a Googler? Like, how do you get hired at Google? What are they looking for, right? So, to be fair, they're a bleeding edge tech company doing lots of different things. So probably not representative of every company, but I think they have a model that's going to apply more and more across all kinds of companies and all kinds of businesses. So one of the things he said is, we don't look for expertise per se. We don't look at like GPAs or standardized test scores, but we look for people who can connect dots in unlikely and creative ways. So look at information and come up with an approach that maybe isn't typical or isn't obvious, right? They look for people who can put together, say, a solution to a problem and articulate it clearly, maybe in a presentation or in a document or whatever, but then also be ready to acquiesce if someone else on the team, say, has a better idea. Again, it's all about collaboration. So working as a team to get to end of job, to problem solve. So I would encourage, students to be aware that the portfolio of products and services that innovative companies are creating and evolving and developing, right, is changing faster and faster. So specific skills or expertise, while valuable, are not going to be the be-all and end-all. I always encourage students to try to move up the value chain, right? So certainly learn coding if you're interested in it, or learn operations, or learn marketing, or learn strategy, or learn, acquire legal expertise. But be aware that those skills are going to be applied in very, very different ways in different settings. There'll be some, again, core skills you can take forward, but there'll be deltas, there'll be a gap, there'll be something you're going to need to learn. So be aware, keep your antenna up that, what do you know how to do and what do you not know how to do, and where can you find those skills and acquire them, right?
Yeah, great. Thanks very much. And you've mentioned a couple of a lot of great companies you've worked with, and probably some have really grown in a short period of time, and some may have taken a slightly different course. So the students watching are thinking about which companies they should join. So have you seen any traits of great companies that have really succeeded and carry on succeeding versus maybe some of those that haven't lasted the course?
Well, I'm a big fan of Google for sure. I'm a fan of Microsoft, which I think has totally reinvented itself since Satya Nadella took over as the CEO. I'm a fan of IBM, although I think they're struggling a little bit, to be honest with you. The one thing I would say, general advice to students, going into the workplace, people often ask me, like, should I go to a startup? Should I go to a public sector role? Should I start at a big company? And what I would say is, just general advice is, if you have a chance to work at a big company, you should do it. Like if you interview at IBM or Google or Microsoft or, whatever. I mean, Aetna Insurance, any, Lloyd's, Goldman, whatever. You should take that opportunity, but don't work there for very long, right? That would be my advice. So do it for 18 months to 3 years. And the reason I say that is because you'll learn things in a giant, complex, matrixed global corporation that you won't learn in any other setting. The way businesses run in those kinds of settings is very, very different. And you'll learn sort of rate and pace. You'll learn how to manage across a matrix. You'll learn how the level of quality of the work that gets done in those organizations is very high. The level of independence is often very high because they got a big portfolio and they're moving fast, and you won't get a lot of hand-holding, that which translates to you'll get a lot of opportunity to do interesting and creative stuff that you manage and run, right? So, I think working at IBM for me was an amazing experience in terms of education, like dealing with a company where, we paraphrase Lord Salisbury, the sun never sets on IBM. When I was there, it was 430,000 employees in like 190 countries, 24/7. It runs day and night all over the world. So again, you'll learn skills that you'll take forward to your next job, whether it's at a startup, or you'll also make relationships that you can leverage. You may find yourself recruited by a business partner or working somewhere in the supply chain, or starting a company that your parent company might want to buy at some point. So that's sort of meta level guidance. And again, be aware you're going to do lots of different things. So,
Yeah, that's great advice, and really good to you've name checked Microsoft who are here today as well. They'll absolutely love that, and I guess a lot of the students watching are thinking about working for larger companies, and it's great they can get such a good grounding for a future career there. So I mentioned a bit about the traits of certain companies that are companies that go on to be successful. What about some traits of young people that you might have worked with? Again, that those young people go on to do great things. So is there certain traits and things that you see from young people that make them great?
Well, I would say curiosity would be at the top of my list, right? So, and curiosity, I've heard John Seeley Brown is a famous sort of author and thinker, right? Xerox PARC expat. He describes curiosity as a muscle that you can kind of flex, that you can learn and develop. So I would encourage people to be curious, again, based on what you're interested in, and use that curiosity in professional settings. Like, where is there an opportunity to be curious and apply skills and experience to maybe transform a product at the company you work at, or a service that your company delivers? Like, find a new way to reinvent. The other thing I say is, my general advice especially for people who are students who are getting into the workplace, and even for mid-career professionals, is it's three adages, if you will. I say, chase the maelstrom, find the chaos, go for the mayhem. And by that I mean, go where they don't know what it is yet. The royal they being existing companies with ongoing business models, right? So the example I cite is quantum, for example. So that's a nascent field that's just emerging. There's going to be lots of interesting stuff to do in quantum. It's probably like viable, non-noisy quantum computers are probably at least 5 to maybe 10 years away. But there are companies that are emerging and consortia that are connecting academia and private sector companies and governments that are really pushing forward in this space. So I would say, if you have some interest in emerging technologies, whether you have marketing skills or sales skills or operational skills, that, for example, that's a space you might investigate. I mean, Amazon just offered up what they call Bracket, which is a pay by the use cloud-based set of quantum computers where companies can, rent space on their quantum devices to write algorithms and run test scripts and explore solving business problems using quantum. So that's an example, right, of where the maelstrom is.
Yeah. Relates to the antennae we're talking about. Moving on to the mess, so you recommend connecting with people and connecting by LinkedIn and with others. I guess there's a nervousness if you're starting out in your career that may not connect back, may not be open to people connecting with them. So how would you encourage people to get past that and to actually get the most out of connecting with senior people? And just before you answer that question, I'm running low on battery on my computer. I can turn my video off and plug it in. So I'll let you answer that question, but I'll just jump off video for a second.
Okay. I would say generally people are open. People know that LinkedIn is a viable tool, and especially during the pandemic, right? Any way we can connect, get connected, stay connected, LinkedIn becomes even more viable. But I would say one of the keys is to create a very, tricked out LinkedIn profile to the degree you can. I know if you're a student, you may not have a lot of stuff to promote or feature, but anything you can that shows sort of your worldview, your value prop, what you think is important, things you've done, cool stuff you've done, presentations you've given, or papers you've written, or whatever, and reach for people. I think you'd be pleasantly surprised. The other thing I would say about LinkedIn is two things. You want to join groups on LinkedIn. There are lots of communities, right, where conversations are going on related to topics you're interested in or where you have skills and expertise, and also follow people that are doing interesting stuff, right? So like when a hiring manager or a recruiter or a VP or a mid-level manager looking for resources goes onto LinkedIn, they not only look at your sort of digital CV, if you will, and your background and things you're interested in, not only just where you went to school, but they look at groups you're in, and they look at who you follow. So, for example, if you're into AI, for example, and they see that you're following Andrew Ng, who's I describe as kind of the Elvis Presley of artificial intelligence, they'll go, oh, well, this guy or gal gets it. They know that Andrew is a thought leader and an influencer, and they're following him to see what he does and what he says and what he posts. So that gives you more credibility around the space you're trying to pursue. So, and again, add 5 people a week. I think you'd be pleasantly surprised. People are pretty open. And I would encourage you to put up a premium account if you can. I know I think it's like $25 a month, and students are on tight budgets, and these are crazy economic times. But setting up a premium account does one of 2 things. It puts the imprimatur on your profile, the little sticker, if you will, digital sticker that shows you're a premium member. It also lets you send what are called in-mails, which are kind of digital cold calls, like emails to people that you don't know that aren't in your network, and lets you connect with them and send them a note. So that's a cool thing too.
Yeah, great advice. Thank you very much. So I'll probably talk about 3 minutes left, and there's some questions coming through, particularly about how get hold of your toolkit and sharing LinkedIn. So your LinkedIn profile is on the screen behind you, isn't it? And I'm presuming you practice what you preach, and you're more than happy to connect back with any students watching.
I do. It's my favorite thing is talking to students about how this works and what I've learned and how I can give them some insight and encouragement. So,
amazing. And then Mitesh has asked about how you get the toolkit as well. So just want to make sure that people know where to get all this information you talked about.
Yeah, so I'll share this presentation with you guys, right, with the RMP team. There's also a lot of my material on SlideShare. I don't know if you are familiar with that, but students, slideshare.com, and you do a search for me. My presentations are there. I have a TEDx Times Square talk that I did in 2013 in New York at the Times Center. And that's kind of fun. I talk about my multiple careers and also what I was doing in social media at IBM. So that's kind of a fun resource. There's a summary of my LinkedIn Learning course on Vimeo. You could take a look at that. And if you're so inclined, I would encourage you to go to LinkedIn Learning and check out my course. Again, if you're a premium member, it's free. And if you're not a data scientist, just go to the middle section of the course. It's about 20 minutes in, and it's me describing the toolkit. And again, you'll see me and the producer actually walk through the steps to build out the grids for voice, antenna, and mesh. So
amazing. And then I've got to ask one last question. It needs to be about the future, doesn't it? So what tech or what companies are you most excited about seeing evolve over the next few years?
Well, so again, I'm a big fan of Microsoft. I think they're doing really interesting stuff. They have a great corporate social responsibility perspective and have for many years, doing good in the global community. I'm a fan of Amazon. Again, they're a huge beast of an organization, but I think they do really interesting stuff, and they're driving job opportunities from everything from warehouse robot implementation managers, which is kind of a cool job, all the way up to their cloud-based quantum computers and lots of stuff in between. I'm a fan of Google also mostly because of Google X, which is their kind of think tank, if you will, their sort of R&D organization. That's the organization that manages the autonomous vehicles program. They have something called Project Jacquard, where they're doing wired clothing. They have an organization called Clarity, which is focused on high-tech medical biotech applications like contact lenses that capture glucose levels for diabetics. And so they do really interesting stuff as well. Those are just kind of 3 examples, but I would also look for startups. Look for startups in quantum. IonQ is a company based in Delaware in the U.S. that's doing really interesting stuff. IBM is doing interesting stuff in the quantum space as well. So again, go where it's something new, something innovative. I mean, the pandemic has driven innovation in technology like Zoom. Here we are using these, virtual tools to connect and share. I didn't have to get on a plane and come to England, although I would have loved to, maybe next year. So look for where the opportunities exist, right? Where's the new stuff? Where's the interesting application of technology to transform or create net new business models? And my final comment would be to your students is, you guys and gals are going to create stuff that's going to look like magic to me, based on what I've seen since I got out of college. So get to it. I want to see it. I want to see some of it. All right.
What a great way to what a great rallying thought. I'm just looking at the chat. Daniel, I'm afraid I don't have time to ask your question, but please do connect with Christopher and ask your question to him. I'm sure he'd love to respond. And mainly, I didn't ask those questions because I don't think I could pronounce some of those surnames. So, but to everyone else watching and everyone else who's been here for the last couple of days, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us in the Innovation and Tech event. To all the presenters, they've been fantastic. And finally, thank you so much, Christopher. Really appreciate that. So we've got 35 minutes or so of this event still to go. So please go and check out the booths. Ask any final questions that you've got. And from a rent replacement perspective, we look forward to engaging with one of these events soon. All right, take care, everybody. Thanks then. Bye-bye.